How's it going, people? Welcome back to another episode of the Here's the Craic podcast. We have a returning guest on today, Orann Coyle. How's it going?
It's all going great. Hey, thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
You are the first person, your first guest to step foot in our new studio, and I want to get your first initial reaction. What do you think? Lethal.
That's all it needs to be.
From the boardroom, now we're saying step into our boardroom. You know what I mean?
100%. I like the sign up here behind me, obviously too.
I know.
Hope my head's not covering it actually.
It probably will, but we've got a wide angle shot to get the sign in, so you're all right. Like
happy days.
But yeah, lots of work have went into it, so we're happy that people like it. It's nice when you walked up and you seen it. I was like, we've done well. That was the first thing. But listen, we've had you on before. I think we had you on like a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And
it was either before or after I got married. I can't remember, but
I think it was before. I think it was before.
After that?
So yeah,
Does it feel any different now after
Better.
being married? Does it?
Fantastic. And here, it's fantastic.
yeah.
Amazing.
And so you've been married a year.
Just over a year, yeah.
And how has that been? Where'd you go on honeymoon?
We went to Tenerife
for
a week, and we have another honeymoon planned in the next year or so. Haven't come up with a destination yet, but
nice.
we're looking for it. I'm just waiting for the missus to finish her degree.
Yes.
But Tenerife spot.
Happy days. Well, the last time we had you on, I think we had a bit more of a general conversation. So I think we'll probably start off first by getting you to kind of re-explain who you are and what you do before we kind of deep dive into some topics. So if you want to take it away in terms of who you are and what you do for a living, that would be great.
No problem. I remember last year my explanation wasn't very good, so I'll go again.
You've been rehearsing in the car?
Well, I tried. I had a 2-hour drive. But so I'm a financial planner. Obviously, you know that, or a wealth manager, as other people know it. My job is basically to give people advice on how they can manage their money, save tax, plan for the future, and just get a better handle on how they deal with their money from a mindset perspective as well. So it sounds a lot more than it is, and there's definitely complications and implications of it. But whenever you dial it down, it actually becomes easier as people learn along the way with you. So that's that in a nutshell, really.
Yeah. And in terms of like what you do for a living, in terms of helping people plan and obviously manage their money effectively, who would be the main sort of people that you'd be working with in terms of like demographic, or is that just a wide range of people from young to old?
I suppose it really depends on who you're dealing with, right? But it's become more diverse, obviously, because of the way that I do things online and giving people access to somebody like me, which generally was inaccessible before now. It's become very wide. So the demographics is anybody from 18 all the way up to 70 now at this point. You know, I could be speaking to somebody who's 21, who's just started a new job, just out of university. Or I could be speaking to somebody who's in their mid-60s, who has spent their life saving or already invested or already earned their money, and they're looking for some guidance. And sometimes it actually doesn't end up being advice. It just ends up being a conversation around how people are trying to do better with their money and their finances, and they're looking for a new opinion or a new perspective.
Yeah. And obviously when someone approaches you in terms of like, you know, fills out a form to have a call with you, what are sort of some of the things that they can expect in terms of like your standard everyday person who may be, like as you say, a 21-year-old or even a 30-year-old who just has a job, they're paying their mortgage, they're paying their bills, they're maybe putting a couple of £100 away a month, and that's really it. How do you approach that? Because obviously from your world, you're looking at that and going, there's more to your money than this. Your money can work for you. But I think over here, we've got that kind of, the way we've all been brought up is like, take your money and save it. And it's only really maybe recently that people, like regular people, have started to cop on, hold on, this money's actually not doing anything, just sitting in a bank. So how do you sort of approach that conversation for someone, that initial call of someone getting on to you and saying, I've just started a job, or I'm in a job and I'm putting X amount of money away?
Well, the first question that I have started asking people is, do you have any idea about managing money, financial markets, investing, things like that? Because obviously I can't be out here making assumptions about what people do or do not know. And, you know, everybody, especially in our generation, they have started to see a lot more of this stuff online, and then they start asking questions because they get curious. But the first question is, do you have any experience? And depending on what their answer is, yes, I have some experience, I've tried this in the past. No, I have no clue, I'm completely green behind the ears. That's whenever I start to say, well, let's start at the beginning, or that gives me a gauge of where to start the conversation. Because at the end of the day, albeit what we see online, most people here in the UK are going to be earning between 20 and 40 grand a year.
Yeah.
That is the average. You've got your outliers that earn more and some that earn less, but generally that is the people that we deal with and the people that we meet quite commonly.
Mm-hmm.
And then over time you get, you know, the outliers who earn more or have come from a different background. But my goal, me personally now, the approach that I've taken is whatever happens, as long as somebody leaves a conversation with me knowing more than they left before they jumped on the conversation or the meeting, then I'm happy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because they can take that information, even if they're not in the right place after we spoke. They do something right now.
Mm-hmm.
They're armed with the information that they can do something themselves, make some changes, and then come back to me or move forward with something.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you
What
ever
would be-
find that,
oh, sorry.
like, do you ever find that like people coming to you are sort of sometimes falsely have like a false like they think they know more than they actually do, and they maybe pick stuff up off online, and you know, people like influencers, as you were saying earlier, that they've maybe heard stuff online, they've learned stuff, but like wrongly. Is there a lot of like common misconceptions that people pick up? That's
I would say that in some topics there is
Yeah.
common misconceptions. You know, the biggest one that's going around is the whole you can buy a property with no money,
yeah.
in terms of you have to buy a property and then do it up and then refinance it and then you get all your money back out.
Uh-huh.
The misconception there is that people genuinely think they can buy a house with no money.
Yeah.
But the answer is definitely yes. Not in terms of the stock markets, because
Yeah.
a lot of people come to me because for whatever reason they feel I'm approachable,
Mhm.
and they know that I'm not going to judge them for knowing or not knowing. But the whole property thing at the minute is definitely something that TikTok especially is
Yeah.
starting to blow that door open, and albeit there's a lot of people out there talking about it,
Mhm.
especially to do with the profit that you can make whenever you rent the property out. People don't realise there's taxes to be paid and there's other things that have to be factored into that.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes it can be like me bursting the balloon whenever we have that conversation, because even a conversation I had today with somebody that owned a couple of properties, they bought the properties themselves and they didn't realise that they would have to pay 40% tax on the rental income, because you can't write off a mortgage like you used to be able to do.
yeah.
You know, you have to pay tax on all the money you earn if you're declaring it in the way you're supposed to be. But probably along the property lines, which is why, you know, the whole mortgage side of things is really important. But when it comes to like investment markets, people come to me and say, look, I have no clue, I've never done this before, I want more information. And genuinely, I don't go onto these conversations expecting something from people.
Yeah.
I say, here's the information, and by the end of it they're probably like, fair enough, maybe I could make some changes and I could have some money to spare that I can now invest or pay into a pension if I'm self-employed, and so on.
Yeah.
Do you think people, like, sort of just to touch on what Ross said earlier, like sort of saying, like, oh, people might be saving like a couple of £100 a month. Do you find like people are pleasantly surprised by how easy it is to get into like investing their money, or do you think it is a bit of a shock when you're like, well, how much money have you set aside? Maybe people don't have savings. Like, do you think it is a bit of a wake up call sometimes? Though?
I think so, because a lot of times, which is probably mad to hear, is I come across people that do earn a lot of money,
Mhm.
but they have a lot less than you would assume that they have. And so, you know, obviously the first point for most people is to get a few quid behind them. Not a great deal, but, you know, a couple of months that would cover them if they lost their job or whatever before they start to invest.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, I have to train myself not to just accept or assume that people have money whenever they might feel embarrassed if they do have to say, I don't have any money.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that they're shocked in terms of how easy it can be. Number one, when you have somebody that does it for you, right?
Yeah.
Somebody like me, but also that there's other options out there where people can do it on their own now. You know, like investing in Vanguard or H&L, Hargreaves Lansdowne. And ultimately, some of the conversations I have to direct people towards new things that they can do it on their own.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, there is a point where I can't do something as small as they might want to do or maybe able to afford.
Yeah.
And I don't feel, you know, comfortable trying to pressure people into putting away more money than they can afford.
Mhm.
So, you know, I think sometimes it's a shock to the system and sometimes it's not. I try and make it as easy as I can, to be honest, Tommy. They give people information and explain a process, but sometimes they just decide that they would like somebody to handle it for them, or they want to do it on their own, which is perfectly okay too, you know.
I think that's a good point you made though, like almost having money for like a rainy day, like cover yourself for like if you like worst case scenario you lose your job, like, but would that be one of the first bits you're like, right, we'll have enough money where like say you do lose your job, you're covered, and then like let's look at like what you can do after that then?
Well, I suppose it's a bit like, you know, the answer is yes, obviously, because if somebody comes to me and says, I haven't got a couple of grand behind me to pay the mortgage or pay the bills or whatever, if anything actually happened to me, but I'm then suggesting that you invest money, you know, from my point of view, am I doing that just to get paid, or am I actually trying to do something that's good for someone? You know, in terms of longevity and the long-term mindset that we're going to touch on at some point on why people should be considering doing things like this. And I'm not saying that somebody has to have 20 grand in their back pocket to protect them. It's basically, what's your expenses? Have you got a couple of months of it behind you in the credit union or somewhere simple on the top drawer in your bedroom, just that if anything goes wrong, that you're not completely panicked. You know, everybody thinks that'll never happen to me, but it bloody can. You know, you can get made redundant like that. So
Ross is probably a good person.
Well,
you know,
and obviously you have experience of that, but you know, you hopefully have that ticked off or whatever, but you know, that happens, and now because things is going wrong in the world and the economy is in question and whatever, there is a higher risk of that, so you definitely need to be thinking about that to protect yourself, you know.
It's a scary, like, the one thing I was blessed enough to have like parents and stuff who always sort of said, you know, put money away for a rainy day, and from a young age that's always what I've done. Now to my own misfortune, I've probably put more aside than what I probably should, because I'm just OCD and cautious, but like at the same time, like I'd say about now I have a job now. Oh, thank God, a much better job, but like I lost mine, and it was like, you do kind of go through the motions and you're like, I didn't think this would be happening. You don't think it, and then when it does, you're like, right. And having that, looking at your bank account and seeing that amount of money, I was able to literally go, right, I have X amount of months to find something here. I don't need to rush into anything. And whereas I've watched people who, I worked in a really big organization, and I've seen people more over the other side of the water having to take jobs that I know they won't want to take because they don't have the and it's and then they'll get stuck in that, do you know what I mean? And it's like a cycle that you can't get out of. Whereas
it's my worst nightmare, to be honest. But I think that if you consider your circumstances, you had whatever you had, they sort of support you, but the next person mightn't have that, and something as simple as this might make them shock on the action and go, right, well, yes, I need, you know, it's not a small sum of money for anybody, you know, it's not easy because of the way the world is, but all you have to do is say you need 3 grand just to protect yourself. Split it up into 12 months or 24 months or 36 months and just start knocking it away somewhere quiet, so that, you know, whenever something potentially does happen, then it's there. But it's at the end of the day that we live in a world where we think the gravy train is never going to end, and you know, that's my job, is to make sure that people have an understanding of the eventualities at a lower scale and a higher scale. And that's why, you know, the first thing people cancel whenever they're in difficulties is insurance, you know, income insurance or whatever. And there's statistics out there, they say that people are more likely to insure their pet, they make sure their pet can be paid for if they need to be looked after by a vet, than they are to insure their own lives and their own bodies and their own income and things like that, which is shocking, because in reality you should be looking after yourself first. And there's many animal lovers out there, and I have nothing against animals, let's just put that out there, but you know, from my point of view, from a purely professional point of view, it's like, well, are your priorities straight? You know, you should be thinking about that first, and then that comes after in the line. So, but you know, in terms of redundancy and emergency funds, which is the first thing that I'll ask somebody, because if they don't have that money, then I can't give them advice appropriately. So that's really important, and that's if anybody hasn't got any handle on what they're trying to do with their money, that's the first place they start, 100%.
What would be like as well as like, if say someone's listening, they're like 18, like, and they're like, right, I want to sort of start thinking about this stuff, like what would be, as well as the, like you're saying, it's a good point, like having money, like worst case scenario you're made redundant, is there anything else you'd advise even someone who's sort of just starting to learn about it? Like what would be sort of like, right, here's a few starting blocks, like
simple starting blocks is cliche term of budgeting techniques, right?
Mm.
Which is a boring subject, I know that, but at the end of the day, there's a few ways where you can technically split up your income hypothetically,
Yeah.
so that you're putting a certain amount towards your needs, i.e. the things that you have to pay for, mortgage, rent, car, insurances, phone bill, blah blah blah. 30% for your wants, which is what you want to spend money on in your life, and then 20% then goes towards savings and investments and or pensions if you're self-employed. And you can fuddle about with that 50, 30, 20 if you want, but as long as you're meeting those things, then eventually as time goes on and you get older and you earn more money, the habit is there, the structure is there, and you just then change the figures that are going into these things. Because what will happen is, say you're at 18, right, and you go to university or whatever, and you come out into a half decent job, and you get paid your wages, you've nothing to pay for as such, at that age, if you're still living at home, anything you have just goes right back out the door, and even if you're able to save some amount of money, I'm not putting numbers on it because it's hypothetical, but by the time you're 25 or 26 or 27, then the prospects of trying to buy a house or getting married and not having to take a loan for it and all them type of things get better. So I think that simple budgeting in the very beginning when you're 18 is the best way to start. Get some money behind you for safety, even if you don't have a lot of expenditure, and then you can start to think about things like invest money and stuff.
What would be your thoughts on, like, I suppose some of the generic stuff, like obviously car finance is a big thing now.
I done
things like that.
I done a few videos on the car finance stuff, and it got about at the end of the day, if you're out there paying big money for a car that could be essentially paying a mortgage on a house, then that's a really difficult thing for me to understand. But some people out there, they don't spend money on anything else, but they spend money on cars, and that's their thing. But I've seen people out there paying 800 quid a month for a BMW X5, top of the range. Fair enough, they own a house and they have a decent job. They're maybe making 50, 60 grand a year, 70 grand a year, but that's seven odd grand a year, or even more than that, 8 grand a year, that you could have easily bought a slightly older car and paid half of it a month, and then invested the other half for your future. It's not that I'm saying to these people, I'm trying to get at you for doing it. It's, here's the other options that you could have had, but you've taken them away from yourself now for the next 5 years.
And the depreciation then too of the car as well.
I like cars. I'm sure you do too, but I'm not out there going, I'm going to throw myself into this leg deep. And whenever I was talking about that, I was talking about the different types of ways that you can buy a car. PCP, HP, personal loans and leases and things like that. And PCP, leases and HP, the interest rates on them are extortionate, and that's where you get caught, because if you do buy a car with like a personal loan or something, the cost of a personal loan is probably going to be much less than PCP or a lease. So hopefully there's
something I didn't even know, because we've sort of chatted about it recently. Like, you've obviously just got a new car. Like, I didn't even and this is me, like 26, like never would have thought that I financed my car like when I was like early 20s, but I think like just trying to put yourself in the shoes of, like, say you're an 18-year-old lad or whatever, and like you just started making a bit of money. Obviously one of the first things you're going to be thinking is like, fuck, I want a nice car, like
100%.
So it's like like sort of trying to like you're saying, the 50 30 20 thing. It's like, well, like, let's be realistic. Like, you're 18, like you shouldn't really be going getting an X5 or whatever, like, you know what I mean?
But I suppose, like, it depends on what they're taught and what they're taught in school and all, what they're taught by their parents and what their background is and stuff like that. But it's not even about the car, it's about what is that taken away from me. If you're 20 and you buy a car, it costs you 500 quid a month, could that actually stop you getting a mortgage if you tried to buy a house in the next 2 years, because you can't technically afford it, but you're locked into a PCP or a lease for 3 to 5 years, and then you're stuck,
Would you have like a rule of thumb for like amount per like percentage of your wage for like spending on a car that you wouldn't spend any more than, like, say 10% of your wage?
That's a good, I've never thought about that. I probably should come up with it, but I suppose I think you have to find a sweet spot, and it depends on the type of car you buy too, because if you buy a brand new car, the cost of that over the next 10 years is going to be huge, that, unless you have a reason for doing that. Some people say, I want the new car and I'm willing to spend the money on it because of X, Y and Z. I don't have to MOT it and all that stuff.
Save money on repairs and stuff.
But there's a big difference in buying a car even that's 3 years old. It's basically brand new, but it might be 10 grand less. And then how does that allow you to keep that money to do something else? And when it comes back to all the stuff that we do, a lot of what I do is just trying to frame stuff and put it into perspective. They say, if you're thinking about doing that, can you also do this?
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, are you actually willing to accept it?
Yeah.
You know, you might go 800 quid a month. I'm massive on the make yours. I don't care. I'm spending the money.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you're willing to accept the implications of what that may take away from you.
Yeah.
And you know, coming back to investing and all that stuff, I think everybody should be doing it in some way or form, even at small amounts, because it's going to, probability wise and statistically, it will do you a good turn. Because our generation is getting bent over the way the world is going.
Yeah.
You know, and house prices versus earnings, for example.
Mm-hmm.
House prices are flying up and earnings are staying low. You know,
Yeah.
they're going up, but they're not as high as they could be. And so I'm just trying to flip the narrative and get the needle to point more at people actually doing it rather than not. You know,
Yeah. I think we, like, especially like our age, like sort of early 20s, like that, young adults, we want a lot. Like you know, I think us three are kind of on the same wavelength. You want the house, you want to, like, you know, maybe if you're in a long-term relationship, get married and all that there. And I don't think I would have realised now that I'm at the stage where I've got married and I have my house. I think if I'd have played out things when I was 18 differently, I would have royally screwed myself over big time. Because, like, you even think, like, if you had your car on finance, if you were taking out an £800 a month, you couldn't be able to put the amount of money you're putting away for your wedding.
No, I think the car thing, like, I find it scary because, like, I don't mean to bang on about car finance, but, like, I just think, like, when I was 18, it was like financing your car, that wouldn't even have been an option. Or 17, like, my first car was like 950 quid because that's what I could afford, like. But then, like, when I was older, like early 20s, like, I got, like, financed the car, but it was like £130 a month, like, could easily afford it. But then it's just like, but now it's so accessible. But then, like you're saying about the weddings, like, even, like, obviously getting married this year, like, I think not saving, like, I think it's like, yeah, if you're in a long-term relationship, it's great, get married. But, like, when you get engaged and then you start looking about weddings and you're like, fuck, like,
it's a lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure. Like,
It is
even,
a lot
like,
of pressure.
this year leading up to the wedding, like we had savings anyway, but, like, fuck it, like, it is a lot of pressure, like
Yeah.
you're like, fuck, it's a lot of money.
Well, I think coming back to what you said in terms of that as well, Tom, is expectations
Yeah.
from our generation and downways are massive.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you talk to your parents, they might say, oh, well, we just went without that and we went without that, but now we want decent car, decent gaff. We want to be going on a holiday a year at minimum half the time now. We want to be earning a certain amount, and in some ways it sets you up for failure mentally, because you're always thinking, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm trying my best now to come out and be like, you know, whatever you're seeing online, that's not the way the world is. You know, it's everybody's not making 100 grand a year. It's just not. It's not technically possible. You know.
Yeah, like, we're noticing that a lot at the minute, because, like, obviously, like, I think us three are in the same boat. Like, you've changed your job recently, I've changed mine recently, and, like, you're really in a job for, like, the past, you're nearly in there for a year. But, like, the amount of, like, me and you'll take the piss out of it, because we'll see, like, marketing manager, and I'll send it to him, and it'll be a list, like, long list of, like, pretty much a job that encompasses 5 roles, and they're like, salary, like, that's competitive. And you ring them up and they're like, 25k, mate, and you're like, no. Like, and to be fair, there's people who will accept that, and, like, that's fine, but, like, it's like, we will send each other messages on that. It's a joke, because you're going in, you've all this, and you, like, marketing manager on paper seems like such a highfalutin job, but then you're like 25, and even for someone coming out of uni, you know, if you were offered 25k a year, you'd be pretty happy, like. But after a while, you begin to realize, like, the expectation of what I want versus what I'm getting, they're not matching. Like, they're in two completely different.
You know, one good thing about, you know, being in my line of work is you meet that many people that have that many jobs. Some of them have the same job, but one could be earning twice as much as the other. And I've started to notice that, you know, from a systematic point of view, that it seems like whenever you come out of uni, they know that you're going to take what you're given, and you cut your teeth on it, and you learn a bit, and you earn a bit, and then you realise, you know, I probably could be doing better here. And then that's whenever you hop on and you start to go up the ladder a bit. But I have also found that for people, you know, you've got the UK average wage 35 grand or whatever, but it seems like, you know, you'll sit under that until you break through it, and then once you break through it, then you sort of go up quite quickly after that. So it sort of seems like, you know, from a systematic way, that's how it happens, and that my personal opinion on it is that's how we're conditioned in the system here, is they go to school, go to uni, take on the debt, get a job that covers what you need to cover, buy a gaff, a mortgage, 200 grand or whatever, and then you're stuck because you've got all these commitments, you know what I mean? And you either have to, you know, bust your arse trying to earn more money, or accept that, you know. And that's, I'm trying to sort of, if I can get at people when they're 19 or 20 and say, this is how it'll play out if you make those decisions, then, because I look, at the end of the day, I ended up doing the same thing. I think I got 40 grand of student loan debt from being in England, you know, and that's a lot of money for an undergrad, whenever I could have just stayed here, you know. Why did I go? Obviously it worked out in the end that it's useful to what I do now, but, you know, it's a scary feat that you can accumulate that much debt before you even get a job. You know, and you're going to be paying it your whole life if you stay at that bracket, you know.
Do you think there is like unrealistic expectations? Like, I think like you're spot on with everything you've said in terms of like, even with social media now, like we've touched on the property thing, but people are like, you could be making X amount a month and all. Like, from speaking to like younger people like coming to you, do you think like people have unrealistic expectations then in terms of investing, of like, oh, this guy's gonna fucking sort me out here, I'm gonna be flying like?
I think so. In some ways, I think that it's all to do with how I frame it or put it into perspective for them, because I never, you know, sell a story that people are going to be drawn into. I say that, especially if you're talking about investing at the lower levels, this is a habit that you have to get so that you can have something when we're older, you know, because I'm trying to deal with as many people our age as I can, you know, and this demographic, because I think that's the people I can help the most. And, you know, when you think about, I say it's 200 quid a month, I'm saying to them, you know, you have to give it a few years before it's actually going to show you where it's at. You know, you have to learn first, see how the markets go. Do you need to make any changes? But this is not something that you're going to double your money on every single year. It's just not going to happen. And the expectations from that come from what we talked about the last time, which was cryptocurrency and foreign exchange trading and all that stuff, which, you know, in the most part is nonsense.
Yeah, what would, like, if someone comes to you, like, what would be, like, obviously, like, we know from talking to you it's long term, but like, is it like a proper wake up call when you're like 200 quid a month for X amount of years? Like what would be, is it just like you're saying, it's just a habit? Like, that's something, if you're going to get into investing, like, you need to commit to this forever basically, like?
From a mindset point of view, but you know, the way that I try and do it is leave it open ended, where people, and they feel like they're not locking themselves into something. You know, like a mortgage is a lifelong commitment if you're going to pay that for 35 years. But I say to people, you know, if you pay into something like this for 10 years and then do nothing, you're still going to end up having a good chance of being pretty much better off in 30 years. You know, you don't have to pay into it for your whole life, because I try to be conservative on how I approach it. But, you know, ideally, they would. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, from an investing point of view, the longer you invest for, the better chance you have doing well, and the better chance your money has of actually performing better than if you do it over shorter periods of time. So you could put 200 quid away and a stocks and shares ISA or something for 30 years and do better than somebody who put away 1,000 for 10 years every month. So you have to let the money do the work for you. The habit comes first, and then the money comes second. And, you know, whenever I be talking to people who say, I only earn 40 grand a year, or I only earn 25 grand a year, but we paid our mortgage and we didn't really spend much, and we've saved 200 grand over the last 25 years of our life using stocks and shares ISAs or on their pensions, or, you know, because they made that choice that if they can, you know, not everybody can do this, that they'll siphon a wee bit of money off, 50 quid a month. It's still 600 quid a year, 12 grand over 20 years, which could double in the markets. And when you scale those numbers up, it gets pretty scary, you know. Yeah,
can you, like, break it down basics? Like, why should someone invest in, like, say, S&P 500, whatever? Why should someone be putting £200 a month into that? Like, what's the benefits of it? Like?
So, obviously, whenever you put money on something like the S&P 500, you're buying a very small slice of the 500 biggest companies in America, technically, which have interest all over the world. And whenever you own parts of that, you get dividends and distributions, they're called, from your ownership. So even if the value of your investment isn't going up, you're still getting paid that wee kicker for actually being involved. So it's like your interest for being involved. And over time, as you pay more into it, the value of those things get bigger. And in the S&P specifically, your S&P investment will spit out some of this interest or dividends or distributions, and then you automatically reinvest it back in, so that you're consistently swelling what you're investing. And over time, that turns into a snowball effect, and then the money eventually starts to work a lot harder than you do. So I know that's a bit more complicated than probably what you were expecting, but the simple nature of it is, if you invest money, that money makes money, which is reinvested back into your overall portfolio, and that continues in a cycle of making new money, then it's going to end up providing you with returns that you can't get from a bank by saving for interest.
I think that's the point I wanted to get this. Like, would you say roughly the SP 500 maybe around 8 to 10% on average over the lifespan of it?
Statistically, yep. So, the last 100 years, yeah.
So, like, what's the difference between that and, like, say, someone just putting money in their savings account or leaving it in the bank? Like?
Well, you're point blank, you're not going to get that level of interest on your savings in the bank. And also, you're not going to get the dividends that are paid out by owning stocks or shares or whatever over a period of time. And so the S&P historically, I think, has done 10.1% a year for like 30 years straight. And so, you know, whenever you dial that up and you put that onto a calculator, if you Google it, compound interest calculator, the numbers can get substantial. And obviously, as you scale up and you invest more money, the numbers get bigger. But the time is the most important thing, because you can get 10% for 1 year, right? Which is 10%. Say, for example, say 10% of £1,000 is £100. But if you invest for 10 years and you get 100%, then you're going to do a lot better than that. And so I always say to people, if you invest more but get lesser returns over a longer period of time, that's better than investing more aggressively over a shorter period of time. Because our generation is get tied up in fast money, and they think, I want to make money like that. But in reality, investing is supposed to be boring. It's just, you can chatter at savings in your head, but it has a bit of a kick and it can actually make some money.
I think because like social media, I think has the thing of like making it sexy and like, I think obviously the whole NFT and things sort of died down, and then crypto and all, it's like, like 10x, 100x your returns, but like in reality it's not like that. Like, it's like making like the smart investments that'll benefit you in the long term. Like, that's
the fast money is for the thrill. That they're looking for a thrill, when, you know, and at the end of the day, we've all tried it, you know, and some people have made a lot of money out of it, you know, when we talked about it the last time. But the nature of it is that if you really want to have a solid, stable, you know, financial future, then using traditional investments like stocks and shares, ISAs and pensions and things like that the government have give us, you know, as citizens, that's the slow route. Yes, it can create good returns. You know, some of my clients' funds have went up 21% in the last 12 months, which is big returns in my game, like. But that doesn't mean that's going to happen every year. But those things add up, and it's boring, it's not sexy, it's not glamorous. Sometimes it's like watching paint dry, and hopefully people don't even look at their stuff even once a year. That's what I want, because they know they can be confident in it. And the reason that people get sucked into looking at, you know, crypto investments every day or stocks that they've bought is because they're scared that the value will go down whenever you shouldn't be. You know, if you put away enough money, do you feel like you're going to get substance out of it? But it's not going to break the bank, then you should be psychologically comfortable enough to leave it alone and walk away from it for long periods of time.
What is the difference? I'd say a lot of people are listening, maybe hearing you say stocks and shares. There's a big difference in investing in stocks and shares, like single sort of markets, like say the likes of putting money into Tesla or something. Like, it's not the same as like the likes of an S&P 500.
No.
What is, for someone listening, like, what's the difference in investing in one singular stock in comparison to the S&P 500?
Well, it's a bit like if you buy one house, right? That's like buying a single stock. So the value of that house can go up and down, you know, and you're concentrating all your money in that one house, right? But if you own 50 houses in the same street or 50 houses in the same city, then they will all fluctuate in value in different ways, and they're not as, you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. So
Yeah.
a single share for like Tesla, for example,
Yeah.
not only do you have the fact that you've put all your money in one egg in one basket, is different industries are perceived in different ways. The technology industry in particular,
Yeah.
there's a lot of fluctuations in it. It's a very volatile industry, because one year Tesla can be doing really well, and then the next year it could be doing crap.
Yeah.
So the value of your investment, if you buy one share or one company, is going to fluctuate massively. But by using the S&P 500, it's 500 stocks that you're investing in that have some relationship with each other. If one goes up, a lot of them go up. But they're in different industries. Even though they're North American companies, they have interests globally. So you're investing in stuff that's, their operations are all around the world. So essentially you're giving yourself a lot more of a runway in case something happens in the world. And at the end of the day, we don't recommend people buy singular stocks.
Yeah.
Not a chance. I would be very apprehensive of doing it myself, even, because you have to really be willing. And whenever you're talking about 200 quid a month, it's not really money that somebody wants to lose. But think about 20 grand, 200 grand, 2 million. That's just not on the table. And that comes back to the slow money. You want it to be slow and steady and comfortable, and enough for you to be able to sleep at night without checking a bloody app on a phone. And that's what I want. So to keep it simple, spread your risk, just like anything else.
In terms of like, obviously we've touched on like S&P 500 and invest in that sense, but like for the likes of, say, the 20-year-old, 21-year-old who has just graduated from uni, and they've got their marketing manager role, or they've got their whatever, and they're starting off at 25 grand a year or whatever, and they maybe have worked a part-time job, not a real knowing of what pensions and stuff and how pensions can work for you, and they've just walked into a job. It's like, here, your employer will match your pension at 4%. What is some of the things that you would be saying to people to home in on from that sense, in terms of like a wake-up call? Because most people will just forget that even exists, look at their paycheck every month and go, well, they've taken pension out, and not really think until 20 years down the line what that's actually doing.
That's a really good question, actually, because that happens a lot, where you will speak to somebody and they say, I've been in this job 30 years. And this is, obviously I'll come back to the younger people, but starting with the older people. And they'd be like, I don't have a clue what this is investing in. I've never checked it. I've just seen a statement come in every year with a value on it. And so that means that they haven't paid attention, and they probably could have invested their money more aggressively when they were younger to get it to make more for when they were older, so they would have more. So anytime I'm speaking to younger people now, or they just enter a job, what normally happens is you get put on the what's called like a default fund, or like it's a default fund basically, where your money comes out of your wages, goes into your pension, and then it's all put in the same place, regardless of what age you are, how aggressive you are, how aggressive you want to be with your investments. And it might be 6 out of 10 on the risk scale. Whereas if you're young, you've no commitments, you've capacity for loss, and you have a long period of time, you should probably be bumping that up to a 9 to get your money to work as hard as humanly possible, because that will in turn, coming back to compound growth, make your money work harder and grow more and grow more, and by the time you're 60 you could have twice as much as a person who never paid attention. So I think that sometimes for me it's easy to slip past that whenever I'm talking to somebody, but I have to be intentional to try and make sure that I'm not making assumptions that people know that, because there's a big difference between paying into a pension and having 100 grand in your pension at 60, or 200 grand in your pension at 60. Which, this is going to sound mad, but if you want to have a pension that's going to provide you with decent income, it needs to be between 200 and 300 grand in value by the time you hit 65, to give you a half decent income from it, as well as a lump sum. So, and whenever we chat to 21-year-olds, they're probably going, what are you talking about? I'm 21, I'm just out of the gates here, going, give me a break. Which is so common, because some people take it on board and some people don't. But and why I do stuff online is so that I can keep banging the door and saying, are you doing it? Are you doing it? Are you doing it? And eventually they'll come on board. And as long as you start thinking about it, around our age, when you're 30, start taking it serious. Not I'm giving up my whole life to make sure I have a pension. Just keep an eye on it so that it's all right. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, like, so I suppose if someone's listening, they're driving to work at the minute, or they're driving home from work, and they've maybe not really paid that much attention to their paycheck. So like, what would the standard, what is it over here in terms of its employer contribution matched at, like, I think it's minimum like 3%?
So the standard auto enrollment.
Yeah.
So it's different depending where you are, but by law, the company pays on 3%, you pay on 4%, and the government gives you 1% in tax relief. So it's 8% of your salary, right? And one thing that's really, that I only come across in the last couple of years is you have to be very careful that the company is paying 8% of your whole salary or 8% of your qualifying salary, because there's some people that come out of the gates, end up in a big job, and they don't realise that the company's only paying 8% of 50 grand as opposed to 8% of 70 grand, and that makes a difference. But if they're listening now, obviously 8% is the standard auto enrollment rules. So it's 8% of your salary, say it's 20 grand a year, 8% of your gross salary, right?
Yeah.
So that works out at 1,600 quid, I think it is.
Yeah.
Obviously, over 10 years, that's 16 grand. Hopefully some investment growth, blah, blah, blah. So it adds up, right? And obviously being aggressive with the investment itself can make that work harder. But obviously there's companies out there, especially in tech and marketing. If you're at agencies, they might say, we're going to contribute 10% to your pension. You know, it's as opposed to 3. We don't need to give you 3. But people don't think about that when they're picking a job. They just think about, what is my salary? It's not all the benefits that come along with it. Especially for teachers and nurses, because like there's a big dispute about how they get paid and stuff at the minute, as we all, well, you might know, but you know, the pension benefits that people in the public sector get are huge, and they're literally 3-4 times as valuable as a standard nest pension or a standard workers pension trust pension that most people end up in for auto enrollment.
How do you go about, like you're saying about like the risk thing with the pension, like how do you go about looking into that or changing that? No?
So simple way to do it, if you're with auto enrollment schemes, which is usually Nest, Workers Pension Trust, or the People's Pension, you can log into your online portal and it'll tell you your investment choice. And with the auto enrollments, if you're on Nest, for example, there only is 5 funds that you can choose from, you know, like low, medium, high, and then there's like Sharia compliant ones for people who are you know, working off Sharia law, and sustainable investments. I think you basically click a button and say, I want to be high risk as opposed to, you know, medium risk or low risk, and they do it for you in the background. So it's not that.
So
it's actually not that hard.
Choice, like, I don't even know that, to be honest. I don't know you could do that. No?
With the, you know, like standard auto enrollment schemes, you have a choice, but it's limited. But say you have a workplace scheme with a company that puts you in the Aviva or Royal London or Prudential or Legal and General or any of those other companies, there's literally thousands of investment funds. You know, when you can go in and say, I want to invest my fund in S&P 500, I want to invest my pension in gold. You know, you can do so many things. I don't recommend you do that.
I think a lot of people think though, like when you put your money into a pension, like, and a lot of people coming out, like there will be 40-year-olds who are probably thinking about this as well. So I'm not just targeting young people, but we do not get taught this stuff in school. Hence why I'm more coming towards that line of younger people just starting a full-time job. I think most people think, right, so I give them 3%, they give me 4%, and that's it. I don't think they actually see that, like, what I think they just think it's like a natural pot that they just put money in and then they come back to it 60 years later. So I suppose what is actually happening with your money when you put that into pension, depending on obviously the scheme that you can go on and choose. You want to be high risk or whatever, but like, what is the kind of standard for someone, say, on a salary of 25 grand or even 20 grand for keeping it simple, but like, if they contribute 3%, an employer contributes 4%, what is actually happening in the background of that pension, as opposed to just the money goes in and that's it?
Well, you know, a lot of the misconception is a lot of people think it's just like a savings pot.
Yeah.
But you basically put your money in, and that default fund that I was talking about, they will automatically put your money into the markets, and then your money is actually invested. So people think, oh, I've never really had an investment. But then I say, well, you've had a pension for 10 years. That money's been fluctuating in value every year. Yeah. And so it's as simple as that. You put your money in, and then they invest it in the background. And obviously, the more aggressively it's invested, by aggression, I mean how much of your money's in the stock market, not government bonds or anything like that, the harder it will work and the more it will potentially grow. but obviously there's no guarantee that it will grow massively over a period of time. But if you pay into it every month and you invest it well, there is a good chance that it'll do well. But it's more of and the weird thing is that there's loads of people opting out of their pensions, which scares the life out of me, because
I done that.
did you?
Whenever I was there, I didn't. Not now, like, but whenever I was like 19, I was working part-time job.
Well,
So I
when
was
you're
getting paid like £5 an hour, so I was like, fuck, this is like 30 quid a week out of my pay. I could spend that in fucking diesel or something. Whatever, like.
I do think like that's a rite of passage, and I suppose that probably
Yeah.
happens more so than not. And without throwing any jabs, like there's employers out there that are saying, right, you have to go into this pension, but you need to opt out.
Yeah.
And that does happen because they have to pay into the pension, and if you opt out, they don't have to pay.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, for an employer, there's a lot of money there that's going on top of your wages, and coming back to off beaten track. But when people are looking for pay rises, it's not just an increase in what you get, it's national insurance and pension contributions and all these things, which is why they sometimes be a bit more skittish about it.
Yeah. I suppose that's the other thing too with the benefit of investing in a pension. It's all tax free,
100%.
beforehand.
And there's a big topic is, why would I pay money into a pension? Because whenever I take it out, I have to pay tax on it. And I'm like, well, you never pay tax on it anyway, because it came out of your wages before you pay tax, and it's tripled in value since you were 20. So if you do have to pay a bit of tax, then so be it. You still have a heck of a lot more.
I suppose that's like going investing, but you have a 20% boost.
Exactly.
Outside of it now.
Pension tax relief for a basic rate taxpayer, it's 20% tax relief is what it's called.
Yeah.
But it's actually 25% on top of whatever you put on. So if you put on 100 quid, you get 25 quid from the government. And the reason, without making it sound too complicated, it's called 20% relief, is because 20% of 125 is £25.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's 20% of the gross amount added on tax relief, or 25% on top of what you put on. And that's only for a basic rate taxpayer. It gets better as you earn more money. But, coming back to, investing money, if you have a pension, plus you're putting some money away yourself along the sides, outside of your normal savings, or after you've saved a certain amount, then things can only get better. They can't really get any worse. And that's why I'm trying to be like, it's a simple admin task. You could do this on an app on your phone, set it up 50 quid a month, and you'll still end up better than if you didn't do it, as long as you let it run its course.
And I suppose a lot of people don't think, like a lot of people just do not think when you put it as simply, I know there is the background to it, which is slightly more complex than what obviously we're talking about. We're talking in a way that makes it simple for people, so we're breaking it down. But I think a lot of people don't understand, like, the other option of just not doing it is just as much hassle probably than doing something with it, because it takes maybe a little bit of admin to set it up and then that's it. Whereas I think the other option that most people just default to is like, right, I get paid $2,000 a month, I take 750 out of that for a mortgage, and then I just put £500 away and the rest I just spend. And that's kind of the default of what most people will do. And then by the end of it, what do you have to show for it, I suppose, is where you kind of come in. And I suppose, like, we touched on it there, like, you're not taught this stuff in school. Like, is there some things which, and even from we chatted there before the podcast about the whole mortgage thing. Like, I know whenever we went and apply for our mortgage and went through all that, and you'll be the same. There's stuff comes out of the woodwork and you're like sitting there completely blank, and you're looking at the mortgage broker across the table and he's going, here we go again. Like,
you have no clue,
because you're just sitting there going like I had to pull on multiple occasions my mortgage broker, like a Michael Scott, and be like, explain this to me like I'm 5.
Your mortgage broker was called Michael Scott. Oh.
No, I had from the office. I was sitting there going like, explain this to me like I'm 5.
To be fair, my view has turned in some way, and I think that they don't teach you this stuff in school on purpose. That's a big statement. It's a big statement, because
Tell me more.
I do think that coming back to the systematic side of it, ultimately, this is going to sound shocking, and I don't want it to be this way because I'm not a conspiracy person, but there is a class system out there, right?
Yeah.
Lower class, middle class, and upper class.
I think I've heard this.
And they don't work unless they're all there. And they say the middle class is disappearing, but there's a middle class trap. Whereas you go to uni, all the student debt, you get a house that you can just about afford, loads of debt there. You get a job that covers that, but you have no freedom of coming out of that job because of these things that you're now committed to. And so I think that they're trying to get better at teaching more in school, but I don't think they're trying to blow the lid off it so that people realise that 18, well, I don't have to go to uni, or I could do an apprenticeship or a HLA, which is a really good opportunity. You know, looking back, if I could do a HLA in accountancy, which was my higher level apprenticeship, I done my original degree in accountancy, but now you can go and work at Ulster Bank. You go to uni a day a week and you work 4 days a week and you get paid 25 grand a year, but you don't pay for uni. You don't pay your fees, they pay it.
That was one
How
thing
mad is
that, that was one thing, like, not a lot of people,
yeah.
like, but in Belfast Met, me and Tommy went to Belfast Met and done our 2 years foundation degree in marketing. And I remember sitting down with one of the tutors, and at the time I thought, because I was hell-bent on taking a gap year between the foundation degree and going to do the degree, and someone told me, well, you can't reapply for student finance, and I just didn't bother my whole looking into it. I just went, all right, well then I'll just
went there.
And at the time I was working in Carphone Warehouse and we were on commission. I was doing all right for myself at that age, so I just went, how much is it per year to study at Belfast Met? I just paid it and forgot about it.
No bother.
Now, looking back at it now, I was able to do that because I didn't live up or whatever. But then I remember having a conversation with one of the tutors, and she goes, oh, I would recommend to go to uni and finish the degree. Don't take a gap year. And I went, right, okay. And she goes, what was it? I remember she sat down, she goes, oh, you can apply for a grant too if you want to work part-time. And I was like, what do you mean? She goes, you can go to uni part-time and you get a grant from the government which will pay for your course and pay for books and stuff. You don't pay it back because you're working part-time. And I, like, the rest of our year just went on and done full-time and obviously took the student loan and stuff. But it's crazy that, like, that's not shoved in your general direction and going, this is an option.
You know, and that coming back to my conspiracy theory, if you want to call it that, you know, university system at the minute is universities employ so many people, so they need that money going through. And you know, I'm proud I went to university, as I'm sure a lot of people are, but there's people out there that look back and go, I just went to university because it was a dumb thing. And you know, I think that at school, I think they're getting better at the apprenticeships, and they are doing financial education for young people now. There's people out there, especially online, and they go on to schools and teach them or whatever, but they're not trying to take them off a beaten track. And you know, whenever I look back on it now, I think who is the smarter person? You know, the person that goes out and tries to start a business when they're younger, and even if they're not making the moon and the stars in terms of money, but they still don't have all these other commitments that, you know, that somebody who went to university has.
There's no better time to fail to, I suppose.
I know, and so, you know, I think that there is a reason why it's not widespread that they don't teach you about it, but I definitely think that the lid's being lifted off it now, and people are saying you need to be teaching it, because really people should be knowing or taught about basic money management whenever you come out of school, because like at 18 you're just like, money out, head out for a beer, you know, you're not thinking about the future. And obviously when it comes to mortgages, then, you know, everybody makes a lot of mistakes when they're younger, especially when the payday loan era was out there. You know, when a lot of people got really shafted by payday loans, and like that might have destroyed their ability to get a mortgage until they're 40. But nobody's talking about it. Nobody's saying that's bad until the government comes out and says that's predatory lending. You shouldn't be lending that money at 100% interest. It's just madness. So, you know, in terms of coming back to school, I think that they just need to, you know, they need to do some life skills classes, you know, like, but at the end of the day, how much is a 16 or a 17-year-old really going to take on? Yeah, that's, you know, too, so I think it just needs to be built into the system that we get taught about it as we get slightly older. But at the end of the day, it means that at the moment, anybody who wants to learn those things ends up coming to somebody like me, and that's why I've tried to make it easy, and I'm trying to make it simple or whatever, because it's literally just a, you know, let's learn something that'll do you some benefit in the future. Do what you want with the information, but at least you have it now, you know, as opposed to not having it.
Just like you mentioned the payday loans thing, what's your thought? I think like Klarna and like ClearPay and stuff like that. Like.
Do you know what though? it depends, because obviously it's all well and good until you fall outside of a period of time where you are not interest free anymore. You know, so you can buy a sofa interest free for 4 years.
Yeah.
You can buy all these things interest free, and that's a good way to manage cash flow, if you want to call it that, and your pay. You know, not everybody out there has £2,000 to buy a sofa or £1,000 to buy an iPhone, so they're useful. But whenever you're talking about getting Just Eat on Klarna, then that's a bad idea.
I suppose,
You know,
like, yeah,
you're
that's
paying interest on the meatball
the
sub
point.
you had 3 weeks ago. You know,
the point, like, I suppose the point I was trying to make was, like, you touched on it there, like, interest free. Like, I think, like, we were obviously talking about it with car finance earlier. Like, what is, like, some of the like red flags when it comes to, like say someone wants to buy a phone or whatever, and like needs to finance it. Like, what's a couple of things maybe look out for before you click the button? Like?
I think that whenever you're buying phones and stuff, it's always the add-ons that seem to catch you. You know, like buy a phone and you get an Apple Watch at £20 a month, and then a year later you're no longer wearing it. You know, and you're still paying for it. So, phone contracts, I think, are really, they've got better, but you know they are expensive. Like, you're paying for a phone for 3 years, you know, and then you're paying a contract on top of it, and the contract goes up every year unless you keep an eye on it. So £50 a month can easily turn into 100 pretty quickly. Like internet, like TV, you know, packages that you're getting. So red flags wise is, if you can get it interest free, then make it your mission. They keep it within the interest free, because it messes up your credit too. If you fall outside interest free for Klarna, etc.
Does that mess up your credit? If even if you're just if you're making the payments with Klarna, you're meeting the targets.
Oh, if you're
and
meeting
stuff
your
like,
obligations, you're fine.
you're fine.
But
Yeah.
you know, I think in the last year, I think that they have to start passing information now to the credit rating agencies,
Right.
so that if you're not meeting the obligations,
So they're gonna know if you're
they're gonna
flipping
know.
using delivery or.
Well, it's not even about using delivery. It's if you're not meeting the payments. You know, if you
right.
say it's 3 months no interest,
Yeah.
but you're still paying for it 6 months later,
Yeah.
they'll start charging the interest. And then are you in the point where you went and bought clothes for a night out that is now costing you 3 times the price
Yeah.
because you've fallen outside the 3 months? So, you know, if you can avoid it, you know, but you know, if there's something that you really want and you can really commit to it, then use it, but everything in moderation, you know that.
The phone contract one is such a, because when I left Carphone Warehouse at the time, they were bringing out the 3-year contracts, and then they were splitting the contracts into 2. So obviously whenever we originally sold contracts, it was just one. It was just like, here's £40 a month, your iPhone, your package. And now it's like, you go and it's 36 months and you pay £25 for your device plan and £20 for your airtime. And it's absolutely mad, because like I was talking to my sister about this. She dropped her phone there not too long ago, and she went to go for an iPhone, and I kind of sat down and went, hold on a wee minute. Like, the math wasn't mathing, if that makes sense. I was like, something's not right here. Sat down and like added it up, and over the 3 years, like a £900 iPhone was costing her like £1,900, where I was like, you can go and literally finance this. Like, if you, I don't appreciate most people can't just walk in off the street and buy a £900 iPhone, but like, Apple do the Barclays 0% thing.
Right, okay.
And then she was able to pick up a contract with like one of the sub networks for like £11 a month. Ended up, she paid like, I think it ended up being like £1,400 at the end, and we times that over the 3 years. And so many people get caught out by little things like that, where they're
look, whenever coming back to investing in itself, right, and looking after your money, that's a major thing. Because see, if you can catch those things, that £500 is some money that you could have invested, or you could have done with that, or whatever. And so it sounds stupid at the time when you're like, how do I save a few quid on my phone bill or my internet or whatever? But if you can chop, say your bills is £1,200 a month, and you can chop 10% of that off by being savvy, that's £100 a month that you can invest. So at the end of the day, when people say I don't have enough money to invest, I would take that on the chin if they went, look, I've looked at all my options and I don't. You know, I've got things to pay for that I just can't get out of. But there is always a way that you can slice something off, you know, that you can end up with something. And I'm not trying to be, you know, aloof in terms of, obviously there's people out there that it might just not be possible at the moment. But if you can invest £25 a month, £10 a month, £30 a month, start and get the habit on the go. And whenever you're comfortable, then you'll be like, this is good for me. Maybe I should be focusing on it.
I think a lot of people, when they see the likes of yourself out there and maybe aren't familiar with your content until they follow you and get to know you, they're seeing things like wealth management, and they automatically default to, doesn't apply to me because I'm only earning 24k a year. Like, do you find that a lot of people will hold off and go, it's not like I'll start thinking about my money when I'm earning 60k a year or 70k a year or 50 even? What, like, and I think one thing that's quite, a lot of people will find quite surprising is like to have a chat with you, that you're not coming in and aggressively telling people like they don't need to make a decision there and then. They're also not charged for the initial call.
Yeah.
And even that wee bit of advice from a 15-minute call with yourself could really change the mindset of a 24-year-old. So like in terms of it, you know, for people out there who are, you know, starting off, like they don't need to wait, I suppose, is one of the biggest things that you're trying to.
Well, you know, that's a running topic at the moment as well in terms of mortgages, but starting with people who are earning lesser amounts of money and they feel like, oh, it's not the right time, then, you know, if you can find somebody, if you're lucky enough to find somebody that will give you the time of the day, even if it potentially mightn't be right for you at that particular time, then you should go and learn as much as you can, because there are people out there in my industry that will say, I'll not even lift the phone to you unless you have 50 grand that you're willing to put away, and which is a sad reality, you know, of our industry. But I don't do that. You know, I do feel like I've been lucky enough, I get good juju, if you want to call it that, from speaking to as many people as I can. And some people might say it's not the right time for me, but by the end of the conversation they might say, you know what, I'm going to work to spare £150 a month. Whether it's me managing it or them doing it themselves, that's fine. But I think that, you know, it's not easy for anybody to pluck up the courage to reach out to somebody in the first place, regardless of how much money they have. And so I'm trying to make myself accessible and approachable so they can do that. And I've, you know, got to the point now where I'm like, look, I want to help you regardless. If I can't do it, I'll show you what you can do. And that might be using Vanguard or HL or trading 212 or whatever, until the point that they are ready to come out slightly more. Because at the end of the day, you know, we are a business and we can only operate at a certain level, like all businesses. But somebody putting away £100 a month or £150 a month, if they want to do it, I'll help them do it. You know, I'll not stop them. Because people have trusted me to reach out to me, and I'll be really conscious of, if I say no to them, or if I say that's not possible or whatever, that they'll think I'm never going to speak to a financial planner again, and I'm not being that person. So I'm going to reduce the barrier to entry as much as I humanly can, so that people can get that experience. And regardless of how much money you earn, some people have stuff going on in their lives where they don't have the time or the brain capacity to do this themselves. You know, so. I'll say to them, I'll do it for you because I want to see you build the habit and form the habit, because regardless it'll work out, you know, statistically in your benefit. So you know, it's, you know, everybody's different too, Ross. Some people will say, I want to work towards that mark, I don't want to invest until I'm making 400, or I can put away £400 a month. But you know, those are the people who fall out pretty quickly when you start doing it, because they're not worried about the habit and the longevity. They're only worried about the monetary terms. It's not about the money, it's about the habit and changing your life, essentially.
Another sort of topic when it comes to investing, I know we've touched on like stocks and shares and things like that. Property's obviously a big one now. Like a lot of, I think you do see a lot of good and bad online, and like it's almost like, oh, get into property, whether it's like trying to flip and sell or like trying to buy a property to let it. Like, what are maybe some of the misconceptions when it comes to that? Or
biggest misconception with property, as I touched on already, is people don't realise the costs that are involved with owning a property. So say, and this is a really good one, well, we residentially, but you know, in terms of if you're trying to let one out, owning a house, as you will know, is not an easy task. But say you earn, let's just 20 grand a year or 30 grand a year, and you rent a house out, and you buy a house, if you're lucky enough, and this is hypothetical obviously, but if you buy another property, right, or if you try to buy another property, you have to earn that money and pay tax on it. They save up a deposit, they buy a house. So if you need to save 20 grand to buy an 80 grand house, they let out, that's going to take you, and I mean years, to save that money up, unless you're lucky enough to have a helping hand somewhere, or if you work your way up income wise. But you earn money from rent after you've paid tax on the money you had to save to get the house. But then you have to pay tax on that rental income too. And people think, oh well, I've saved up 20 grand if I'm lucky enough to buy a house, as an investment, by the way. You know, this is not just residentially. And then they think, I didn't realise I have to pay tax. And then it's like, I done all that work, they make no money because you have to pay the mortgage and the insurance and the rates and then the tax. Is that what you're asking me in terms of property investment or residentially?
No, like in terms of property investment, because like I suppose like in my position, like I'm obviously renting and like getting married and stuff, and like it's just the things you think about, like, and like I think one thing you see a lot of online and like just chatting to people is like people are like, oh, properties, like if you want to make money or like long term get big returns, it's like you need to get into property. But then like I suppose like asking someone like yourself, like what is it, like is that the only way, like is like comparing property to like investing in stocks and shares, like what's the benefit
of one versus the other?
Yeah, pretty much.
So whenever you, and look, I agree with property as well, because we talked about the S&P 500 as in terms of spreading your risk across 500 different things. Investing in the stock market and getting in the property is a further version of diversifying of risk. But you know, whenever you invest in the stock market, there's no leverage. So whatever you put in is all you can put in. You can't bet more money than you have unless you're using something else. I'm not even going to get on there and give people bad ideas, but property, you can take a mortgage. So you can turn your 25 grand deposit into a 100 grand house. And that obviously will grow in value over the long term and pay you rental income, as long as you are aware of the other commitments that you have in terms of paying taxes, maintaining the property, and you know, paying rates and paying insurance and things like that. Because investing in the stock market at a lower level is very easy nowadays. You know, you can get involved in it, see how it works, get comfortable with it, but taking on a property they rent out is a massive commitment. You know, your own house they live in is a massive commitment. What happens if somebody's not renting it for 6 months? Who's paying the mortgage? Do you have the money to pay the mortgage if that happens? Leading back to, do you have emergency funds? And so you see way away it all stacks up like a house of cards. But I do think that in terms of property investment, it's a way of you leverage the bank's money. They buy property that grows in value and provides an income. And you can grow that value or grow that wealth faster than if you invest in the stock market, because you can't use a mortgage in the stock market. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
So if you can do both, you know, without setting expectations too high, throughout your life, then do it, you know, because it's just another string to your bow or a layer to your cake.
I suppose it's just like realising it. Like I think even like with a buy to let, you need to have like a 25% deposit, like,
plus legal fees, plus stamp duty. So you're talking, if you want to buy a house at 100 grand, you need 25 grand as a deposit. You need a couple of grand for solicitors fees, and then you need a couple of grand for paying additional stamp duty on a property that's not your main home.
3%.
You know, 3% is right. So it's really 30 odd. But you know, there's all these different techniques of buying dilapidated houses and putting 5 grand into them and then refinancing them for double what you bought it for. Which is, you know, you can ask Carly about that because she seems to find them. But, you know, I couldn't. You know, she's brilliant at what she does as much as all the other ones are. But you know, there's pros and cons to all of them. My view on it is, if you are young and you can accumulate some money in savings and investments and then go, right, I'm happy with what I've done, what else can I do? Then move on to property, or do it the other way around, as long as you don't cram all your eggs into one basket, you know. It is risky. It's risky either way, stock markets or property, but you have to be able to protect yourself if it goes wrong, you know.
I had this random thought the other night. I might go off on a bit of a tangent. But I was laying in bed and I was thinking, why can't I become like a sole trader, right? And say anything I bought, put it down as an expense and write it off as tax. Why can't
Murky
I do
waters
that?
Here. Why can't you?
A
so lot of things you
can. Have to
can
pay any tax
in terms of your job.
But if I don't have a business, say I'm bringing in an income, right? Say I'm bringing like 20,000 a year,
right?
And then obviously you're over the threshold by 7,500. So like anything on that's getting taxed. So like say I bought a table, a computer, can I write that off?
100%.
But do I need to have a business to do that?
Whenever you're employed, you see it's a lot different. Because it's really, you're asking a good question there, but when you're self-employed, you can manipulate your taxes in terms of expensing things that generally you can't expense whenever you're an employee because of the way taxes work, which is really strange because, you know, you could earn 25 grand a year as an employee
Yeah.
and be worse off than somebody who earns 20 grand a year as a self-employed person, because they can reduce their taxes. So are you asking me why can't you do it if you're employed?
Yeah.
You know what? I have no idea. I have no idea, and that's a question for an accountant. That's not
My
a
head
question for
was
me.
just- this came into my head the other night whenever I was trying
So-
to go to sleep and I couldn't
Suppose
sleep
if you
after.
had like, because if you're a sole trader, you have a unique taxpayer reference.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
UTR.
can you use that to claim back tax, basically?
Yeah, but
yeah.
so whenever you're employed, you can claim back stuff. You know,
Okay.
like you can claim back specialist workwear. You can claim back the cost of subscriptions. You know, if you're part of a, you know,
Didn't know that.
like a it's just absolutely amazing, exciting information. Like, say, like I have to pay,
It's buzzing.
I think, a few £100 a year to be part of the, you know, this Chartered Institute of Insurance, which is the body that
Mhm.
I'm part of as a financial planner, and I can, if I was employed, I could claim the cost of that back, because
Yeah.
that's like a work related expense. But you know, I couldn't kit the bedroom out and
Yeah.
claim that back. You know,
Yeah.
but there's definitely things that you
Can't
can claim back,
Netflix basically.
like job related expenses. You
Yeah.
can claim them back, but you
How
know,
do you
as-
go about doing that then? Like,
you can do that on the HMRC, but you have to
Yeah.
register for, you know, claiming back job related expenses.
and do you
Don't-
need like a UTR for
I
that?
don't think you need a UTR to do that, but you definitely need access to the government gateway website.
Just
that's
probably
free to
through
sign
your
up.
own personal account.
Yeah.
Right.
But you know, as I'm a financial planner, I'm not an accountant, so
Yeah.
my accountancy degree has done me well, but not that well. So I always let accountants deal with that sort of stuff, because, you know, as much as we may know, there's things that we don't know,
Mhm.
because they're tied up, the wires are crossed. But like, accountants do completely different work to us.
Yeah.
I might say to somebody, you know, you put money into a pension and you can claim back extra tax relief,
Mhm.
but the accountant deals with it then. You know, I'm the forefront, but I'm going to ask that question actually in the next couple of days to an accountant.
Save a lot of people a lot of money.
Because at the end of the day, you know, I'm here to, you know, get perspective too, and
Yeah.
if that's a question that you might have, then I need to know that answer for somebody who might ask it in the future. So cheers, dead on for that.
I think one of the biggest like takeaways that I know in the last time you were here, well not here, but last time you were on the podcast, we talked very generally about things like, you know, what you can do, and I know we touched on like NFTs and whatnot, but I think one of the biggest things that you taken away from this podcast is like more streamline on what you do and how you can actually help people. And I think the point you made about like breaking down the barriers is such a good one, because there will be people who are driving along at the minute and they'll have not thought about their pension, they'll have not thought about investing. They're maybe putting £500 a month away, and that's just it, that's what they think's the norm, whereas and they see so much bollocks online that they're like, this not I'm not that person, whereas it's actually really simple to just get into. And by the time, if you're willing to hold it out and willing to commit, your return in 20 years could be 20, 30 years, even more, could be
Substantial.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, the approach is for me is, if you want to find out more, I will have a conversation and naturally let that conversation develop and help you learn as I go along, instead of sort of intimidating someone by throwing all this massive stuff out at them. Because, you know, some people will take this stuff very seriously and they're like, I check my pension every 3 months and why is it not doing this, and I want it to be invested in that, regardless of how much money they earn. And then some people are that nonchalant about it. They're just like, I trust you, you work away, happy days. But it takes a conversation for me to gauge what type of way that person wants this to work. So help, just as the main term. If you want help, I'm happy to have a conversation. And then when it gets more serious, you know, I can provide the more specific information.
Yeah.
But very easy structure to live your life by, and I'm trying to live my own life by it as yourself: property, investments, insurance, savings, and pensions. If you can spread yourself across those 5 things, then there's not really much wrong that can go wrong in your life. You know,
Yeah.
some savings, some investments, a house, if you're lucky enough. Insure yourself, insure your income, insure your sickness if something happens to you, and pay into a pension.
Yeah.
You know, it sounds simple that way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The numbers don't matter. The structure is what matters.
I think though it's good though, because when you do, I know whenever we went for our mortgage and you're hit with things like income insurance and health insurance and all that there, you're in the hustle and bustle of just buying a house and you kind of go, I'll revisit that later.
Yeah.
And it is like a breath of fresh air to have someone come in and like revisit it, because you can't know everything. Like, you know, and a lot of people just want to try and work it out for themselves, which inevitably is not, you're never going to get around to it. You know what I mean? You'll sweep it under the rug for next year, and then next year will come and you'll sweep it under the rug again.
I think so. And obviously health insurance and income insurance are literally a privilege. If you can afford to pay for them, you know that as a privilege. Some people will forego other things in order to be able to pay for them, but life and critical illness insurance and house insurance obviously is the main things. Income insurance is, as I've mentioned before, is something that really will give you a lot of safety psychologically. Yes, it costs money and it's above and beyond what is really the required minimum, but a mortgage broker will say, you might think that nothing will happen to you, but we are on a point in time where the statistics for somebody getting sick and being off work is huge. It's like 50% plus. Every 1 in 2 people will be off for a certain period of time, which is why income insurance is important. But also health insurance. Clearly, we are going down the direction of, the GP's too busy. You have to make 100 phone calls to get in touch with them. Health insurance saves you time, but it costs money. And if you can afford it, it's a good idea. But, somebody can't be coming at you and throwing all this at you at one go. It's not easy to take it on, because your mortgage might be $1,000 a month, but then your rates and your insurance and health insurance and income insurance could be £250 a month, and then you're like, this is worse than I thought, and then you're having to forego buying food or electric or gas or whatever it may be at the worst case scenario, in order to pay for that, and that's scary. So, but I do think that in the next couple of decades, that private health insurance will be something that more people have than don't. Bupa and all that stuff.
Just on that, look, we obviously bought a house recently, so we had to get.
Congrats.
Thank you. We had to get health insurance, but just that whenever we did get it, our mortgage advisor advised me to get like a higher sort of end one, but it ended up it was like £40 a month, which I was a bit like, fuck, that's
Is this life insurance or is it health insurance? They're different.
Life insurance, sorry.
Right.
Yeah. So it was like £40 a month, but he sort of like listing all the benefits and stuff. But obviously, I was sort of not zoning out. But I was like, right, whatever.
Right. Okay.
So like, we're sort of thinking now, like, should I just like go on to a cheaper one? Maybe go for like something that's maybe 10-15 quid a month.
Right.
See is it actually worth it, or should I keep that on? Because what he said was like down the line, he wishes he could have that. Be paying that for.
So the way that they are calculated, they're calculated on maths and risk. So the younger you are, the less at risk of you dying, basically, which is obviously a given. But some people will take insurance when they're in their 20s for more than they need to. Yeah. And fair enough, you have to pay for it when you're younger. But when you are older, see if you were 20 years older and tried to put the same thing in place, it could be triple the price. Yeah. And so what he's saying is correct. But obviously, there's a sweet spot there where you're like, I'm comfortable paying that because I understand the benefits. Yeah. But also, I know it will benefit me in the future. Versus you just taking a whole whack of insurance that if it's too expensive, you're going to end up cancelling in 10 years. And then you're like, I've just paid 10 grand in insurance premiums and cancelled it. Yeah. And the insurance companies, this is on sidetrack, they're set up so they don't lose money, And there is people who cancel insurance, coming back to cancelling insurance or not insuring yourself before your pets. Yeah. It is worth it, but there is a sweet spot there, and 40 quid a month, genuinely, is not that bad. No.
Is that 40 quid for both of us or 40 quid each?
Just me.
Just you, right? So
you're an expensive boy.
What is it on the other side? 40 again, or more or less?
Oh, for my girlfriend?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be around the same. Like,
right, so 80 quid. Say it's 80 quid, that's...
I do think it is manageable. It's just, I know there's cheaper options. I'm thinking in the long run, like, I forget one, maybe 15, 20 quid. That's 20 quid a month. Yeah, it's not a lot 1 month, but a year, that's maybe, 240 or so. Yeah. We put into something else.
Well, so whenever it comes to higher level benefits, right, your advisor probably give you a piece of paper at the time that explain the benefits, and so you can get really basic life insurance that will cover you for like death and then like heart attack and stroke, 2 things, Whereas if you get one with more benefits, it could cover you for 400 illnesses, or it could cover you for terminal illness,
Yeah.
which means that if you get diagnosed with a terminal illness, it'll pay out even though you're still alive.
Right.
You know, so there is a range of things, and the difference might only be £3 a month or £4 a month now when you're younger,
Yeah.
but that is worth it. But I think whenever you pay for insurance at 10 or 11 quid a month, you're sort of tricking yourself into a false sense of security, because you're like, I do have insurance,
Yeah.
but like, what do you actually have? You know,
Yeah.
but 100 quid a month is a lot of money for insurance. You know,
Mm.
that money that you're never really going to see again in most cases. But you know, try and understand it a wee bit more, and then
Whether it is
Probably
worth
make
it
that
or-
decision
or
then.
Me.
You know,
Yeah.
make that decision then.
Like
But
price around as well. Like there's probably other people who'll do it for cheap. Because I know whenever we got our life insurance, the boy handed me a document, and I was like a flipping. Thought I was going to take the legs of the table off. Like you were reading through it, and I was like, "This is what you're covered for," and you're going, "What do I need this for?"
but I suppose that's where you have to find people like
Yeah.
that you can genuinely trust,
Yeah.
because there is a transactional relationship there getting a mortgage, but you need to know that they're really thinking about you instead of you know,
Yeah.
which is a big thing for me to be throwing out there, because you know that's how people in the industry make their money. But you know, there is a point where you're like, who am I really acting for here?
Yeah.
But have a look at that, because it might just be life insurance. It could be life and, you know, critical illness insurance and
Yeah.
income insurance. So, you know, let me know. I'll look at it for you if you want. No problem.
Yeah, definitely.
If someone's listening to this right now, wants to get in contact with you, what's the best? Because I think we've opened up a lot of doors here that we maybe didn't do in the last podcast in terms of like actually, you know, making you accessible to people. So someone wants to get in contact with you, what is sort of the best? Is it just Instagram? We'll obviously link that, but
Definitely. That's probably the easiest way to get in front of me, because I obviously manage my own stuff online. Or contact you fellas and you can let me know. No problem, whatever suits. Again,
15%.
Hi,
fee.
look. very
Go more,
casual.
go more.
Very casual approach, and I try and do things casually so that
Yeah.
people understand that I'm not going to force them
Yeah.
into a corner. So, you know, just give me a shout on Instagram.
Yeah.
There's a waiting list there if you want to leave your details, and you know, we'll see what happens from
Yeah.
there.
Well, it's been a very insightful podcast as usual. Thanks very much for coming on.
Dead on. Hey, I think sometimes I think that it's not even useful information, but hopefully it's useful to somebody
I
who
think
is listening. You know?
I do think though in comparison,
informed.
yeah,
Yeah.
to what,
Are you?
I've learned a lot.
so like to what
my
we,
job is done.
to what we talked about a year, like the three of us, our lives have changed dramatically in the past year. So you're sitting saying stuff, and last year you would have said that, and I'd have went, but now you're saying it, and I'm like, God, I couldn't agree more,
Well,
because
that's good news.
you know what I
I'm happy to
mean.
hear
That head wasn't on your shoulder, like my head. At that stage, I didn't have the same head I'd had on my shoulders now, you know. So, yeah. Does anybody get anything else? Are we all
I'm
good?
just
That's a
wallowing
good
in
one.
my
Sort of had a
compliments
quick
here.
one. I had a quick one. Could you
Go for it.
quickly explain? Don't touch mic. What's the difference in PCP and hire purchase for buying a car? We were discussing this the other week, and I was sort of trying to tell him, but I'm now thinking back. I don't really know myself.
So, well, like while you're thinking about it, I'll explain what we were talking about.
Yeah.
So essentially, Shay was making the point of like, so I was looking at a car. I've been looking at a car. I'm gonna get married, whatever, and I'm thinking about getting a car next year. And there's like a car me and I was looking at, and I was like, I might go PCP, because in my head I'm like, you pay the payments. It's a lot more affordable than HP, and then at the end you have a balloon payment. So, whereas at the end of HP it's more expensive monthly payments, but at the end you own the car. At the end of PCP, you have a balloon payment where you can buy the car, but that could be like 10 grand.
Yeah.
Shay was saying he thinks with PCP you're only out really paying the interest, so at the end of the agreement you're actually paying what they're valuing the car at in like say 4 years. So your point was basically like, I don't know if you should go for PCP, but then my point was like, but like the way I see it is like 4 years you have a car, and then if you want a new car you just go and move on to another one.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that is a difference, but the difference is that HP, if you're along your lines, you'll own the car regardless of if you know, after the period of time that you pay for it. But the balloon payment is a big thing, because you know, if you don't want to keep that car, you can let it go and get a new one without having to pay the balloon payment. Whereas in the HP you would have paid for it anyway.
Yeah.
But obviously with PCP, if you have a balloon payment, I'm fairly sure that you can refinance the balloon payment. You know, you could take a personal loan if you wanted. They pay out the balloon payment and spread out over a period of years.
Yeah.
So look, at the end of the day, I wish I knew more about that, but balloon payments and PCP and HP and stuff, I've heard more of that, and leasing of that happens more through businesses.
Yeah.
But if you can, my personal preference is a personal loan. You know, if you're going to buy a car with the credit union or the bank.
You can't
Yeah,
get a
that's what I
personal
done with
loan
the
for
credit
PCP
union.
though, can you? On the
No
interest.
personal loan, just through like credit union. That's what
Straight
I
up,
did.
and you buy the car and you own it, and you pay the loan back to whoever you borrowed from.
It was far better. It was like 10% or something.
I think
Interest
with
was fucking-
somewhere like Tesco Bank and stuff, you can get 7 or 8%.
I
Which
went to Tesco Bank, so I applied for them and said they'd advertised. What was it like 14? No, sorry, 10. It was like 7 or 10%, somewhere between that there. So I applied for them, and they came back. They're like, oh, credit score 100%, like it's high, like. And I was like, right, so what percent? And it goes 15. And I was
You know why
like,
that-
what?
do you know why that probably is? Because whenever they look at the risk of a certain amount of money that you're borrowing,
Yeah.
if you're borrowing between, I think it's like 1 and 7 grand, the interest rate's higher. Between 7 and 12, it's better, and then
That
between
was
12
what
or more,
happened
it's
then.
worse.
Because it was, I asked, 7,000 I was looking to borrow. So I goes to them, well, like, what if I borrowed 7,500? And they were like, well, we can't recalculate it now. You've already applied for like 7,000 or something. They were like, oh, this might affect your credit score now. So I panicked and I was like,
I'll just
fuck
take
this.
it.
No.
Oh, you didn't
No,
do
I
it?
didn't take it. No,
Right,
no.
thank
I was
God.
like, no, just leave it then. Just leave it.
Aye.
So like, if I had asked for more money, I would have paid back less.
Yeah, probably. Which is mad, really, when you think about it, because it must be, however, they're basically pushing people then to be like, we want you to borrow between 8 and 10 grand as
Yeah.
opposed to 7 because it suits them. But, you know, in terms of credit scores, that's a good one. So if you're flat out searching or applying for loans, credit cards, any agreements, then
Yeah.
that's pinging a hard search, you call it, on your credit score.
Yeah.
Whereas there's a soft search too. And if you apply for things in very quick succession, then your credit score will get slapped. And so
Yeah.
sometimes whenever you apply for credit or pay off credit, your
Mhm.
credit score will still go down shortly. But you know, I would go for a personal loan all day, any day. I just think that there's too many ways for PCP and HP where they're making money off you.
Mhm.
Whereas, you know, yes, they need to make a bit of money, but not where you're suffering for it over a 5-year period, you know.
Yeah.
Especially what's came out in the news like the last couple of months, like with the Modanova
That's
and all
right,
those
yeah.
ones, like charging dealerships fucking bumping up the interest, like.
Taking their commission out of it.
But yeah.
Well, anything else?
Don't worry.
We've got you on just to satisfy our own needs. Sorry,
Sorry, it's no bother.
But look, listen,
glad.
thank you very, very much for coming on.
No
And
bother.
we'll
Thank
obviously put a link in the descriptions and all for anybody who wants to get in touch with yourself. I think the main takeaway is it's not rocket science. Like, there's people
No.
out there to help and get cracking on with it. Get started as early as you possibly can.
100%.
But listen, it was a pleasure having you on again. I'm sure we'll have you back on at some stage. And until then,
Annual residence now at this point. Hey, I
That's
don't
it.
mind, I love it.
We'll have
Thanks
you on a
very much.
retainer.
Aye,
But yeah,
100%.
thank you very much.
No bother. Cheers,
All the
lads.
best.
Thank you.